Welcome to the RBL podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes, and if you're ready to be inspired and encouraged, this podcast is for you.
Rise by lifting others. She rises.
Hey RBL, this week we are diving into one of those hot topics, that is relationships, and more specifically, singleness. I have with me today Alisha. So hey Alisha.
Hey.
So Alisha, why don't you share with us something interesting about yourself?
Okay, so what's interesting about me? I was born in Ottawa. I think that's kind of interesting, the capital.
Nice.
I think the most interesting fact that I actually kept a secret for a long time is that my mom was adopted. But not only was she was adopted by white people. So I was like pretty much raised by white people and black people. But yeah.
That's actually a really interesting fact. You should see my face right now. I'm like, really? I did not know that. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so Alisha, of course, I love to start off with a testimony because it's really nice to see how everyone's come to Christ, and of course, like just their journey. So why don't you give us a little bit more of a background of who you are and who you were before you came to Jesus?
Okay, so I was raised in a single parent home. We moved to Toronto. Like I said, I was born in Ottawa. So when I moved to Toronto, we moved to Jane Street. So it was a huge culture shock. And so we went from living in Ottawa to living in the hood. And and I was generally known for just having my head on my shoulders. I was athletic. I was generally a good kid. Like I obviously, like, everyone has their flaws and whatever, but I think based on my surroundings and the people who were around me, you know, I wasn't at every party every weekend. I wasn't off getting pregnant or like whatever. I knew a lot of teen moms, and so I think just because I was compared to the people around me, I think I was looked at as like, you know, she's generally a good kid. She has her head on her shoulders, and I think I would classify myself as a Christian before I really knew what a Christian was. And that was simply because the Christians who were in my general area or who went to my school, they were not necessarily saved. And my only example of Christianity were people who would come to school in skirts and change into pants because they weren't allowed to wear skirts. Or in one of the churches I went to when I was younger, I remember the teenagers would go to the basement with like girls and guys and do things downstairs, and a lot of those girls wound up being pregnant at like 16, and there are a few of us who didn't wind up being pregnant who went to that church. So that was pretty much my example of Christianity. It was kind of just like, you know, my mom waking me up and being like, you need to go to church, and me being like, oh, okay, I'll go. And so I think it was just more of like a religious experience, and me thinking I'm good enough. And I remember I got invited like a few times to what was then known as the Potter's House, and they were doing a play, and it was an Easter play, and so I went and I watched it, and it was just the life of Jesus, like it from beginning to end, the life of Jesus from birth to resurrection. And it's something that I was familiar with because I went to church and because I went to Catholic school when I was really young. So it wasn't anything new, but I do remember specifically that when the altar call was pulled, it was done by Pastor Gary, and I remember he said, "Who in here needs Jesus?" And that was the first time in my entire life thinking, you know, I'm a Christian, I'm a good person, that I was confronted with the fact that I need Jesus. And I couldn't tell you why, other than the fact that it was just God tugging on my heart. And I gave my life to God then, and that was in 2008. So 13 years later, here I am.
Wow.
So praise God for keeping me.
Yeah. That's a really good testimony. 13 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Does it feel like 13 years right now?
I mean, like, I know I was telling you earlier, I feel it when I see the young kids who are like teenagers now. Like the kids who, when I got there, they were in the nursery and they were in my Little Lambs class. Those kids who are now 14 and have deep voices, and like I have to, like, you know, go on my tippy toes to hug, and like that kind of thing makes me feel like, wow, like wow, time has gone right by. But
right.
It's the kids. It's the kids. They make me feel old.
Yeah.
Other than that, I feel like I'm young, man. What are they talking about?
How old were you when you got saved?
I was 17.
Oh, wow.
I was going to be 18 that September. I got saved in March of 2008. But at the time, I was like 17 and a half.
Okay, so you are 30 now.
Yeah, I'm 30.
Okay.
I will be 31 in September.
Okay. I mean, you don't look 30.
Thank you.
Hey, right? And 30 is the new 20.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like the 90s generation, like, we had it best. So everyone wants to be like us and dress like us and listen to our music. So I'm not mad.
Best generation. Okay, so now during that time, from, of course, like when you got saved up until even right now, you... Of course, I would assume we're single during that period. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so, of course, this is a podcast on singleness. So how would you describe this season of your life?
Like this current season or just leading up to this season?
Yeah, like walk us through. Let's.
Okay, so I mean highs and lows. When I was like 17 and I came here, we were all single, so it was easy to be single because everyone else was too. Like, we didn't really know anything different.
Right.
As a few years started to go by, you know, people start getting married, but you're just happy. And I didn't ever, like, it took me a long time to want to get married. Like, I was kind of hesitant about the whole marriage thing. Like, I remember being like, you know, yeah, I was definitely, like, as I was younger, I was in no rush. I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, you know, I'm happy for you guys. I will be your bridesmaid. I will carry your bouquet and do this and that and whatever. But to actually make that commitment myself was a little bit scary for me. And then as I got even older, I think that's when I started to see, like, a bit of a shift where I was like, ooh, I'm getting older. Like, when am I going to start having kids? Am I going to, like, just, like, all these questions start to come in your head. Like, am I going to get married? You're looking around your church and thinking, like, there's nobody here for me. And then you have people going, you're so picky. And it's like, picky? Where are my options? Like, I'm not picky. Like, so I think, like, it started to shift as I got older, that it was, like, it's almost like you're kind of confronted with the reality that, like, well, who are you going to marry? So
what would you say was the age then that those thoughts started coming in?
That's a good question. And I'm not 100%. I think around 25. 25. I think around 25 is when, mark. Yeah, because I actually remember my 25th birthday not being happy to turn 25 at all. I was like, why is this happening to me already? Like, this did not feel like 25 years. I was not prepared for 25. Like, it's funny because I actually have a video of one of my cousins crying-ish because she was 25. And I remember laughing at that video and being like, it's not a big deal, until I got there. And I'm like, wow, this is a quarter of a century. My life is over. Like, so 25, I think, was a hard one.
Yeah. I feel like that's the common age for some reason. I think because it's like it's right in the middle of 20 and 30. Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what now? Yeah. And for the most part, I think I would say a lot of people anticipate that by 25 they would be married sometimes too. Yeah. So
you make a life for yourself in your head, and when things don't go according to plan, you start questioning and wondering. And,
right. So in that time then, okay, let's just backtrack just a little bit. So have you had seasons of, let's say, discontentment? And if you did, how did you combat those seasons?
That's a good question. So I think when I was like 25, I can't really think of how I combated those seasons. I feel like they went away on their own, or God was just like, I can't really give you like when I was younger, but I think what stands out to me more is when I got even older, like when I was around 28 age.
My age.
Yeah. Only because that's when a lot happened. Number one, I think the start of things was I wrote a letter to myself when I was 18 that I planned on opening 10 years later.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so I remember thinking, it's time to open this letter, and I don't want to open it at all because I'm going to be so disappointed that I had all these, like, I'm afraid of what I wrote when I was 18, like, you know?
Right.
And so I think that was kind of like the start of things, of like me just being like, I guess, fearful in a way. And so I did open the letter. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Obviously, there were things that I thought I was going to have done by now that I didn't, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Then fast forward, I'm realizing that I'm getting close to 30. And from the day I got saved, all I would hear is that women past 30 don't make it, or women past, like, single women past 30 don't make it, or single women past 30 are funky. And I heard that from new convert days until, you know, until, like, I was at that age myself. So I think what happened for me is that I was almost, like, just so scared of turning 30, and those lies and words were, like, haunting me in a way. And it was almost like I wanted to give into it. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, but I just remember being, like, almost like giving God ultimatums, like, and this is recent. Like, I mean, I've been saved for so long. Like, this is not something that, like, oh, you know, I was a new convert. Like, no, like, I know God, and I'm like, but this was a real struggle for me around that age. And I remember kind of being like, if I'm still single and 30, like, I'm probably gonna leave because I can get a guy out there.
Right.
So I remember thinking, like, okay, you know, that age is coming, and I'm kind of starting to give God ultimatums at this point, and I'm not doing well spiritually at all. I'm making poor decisions. It was just a really rough time. But I just praise God that I have amazing friends and who could kind of, like, look at me and be like, something's off with Alisha, and who confronted me, like, are you good, sis? Like, is everything okay? And I had friends who I know were praying for me, who questioned me, who held me accountable. And I was in a place where I really didn't care, though, like, with what they were saying to me, or I just didn't care. Even, like, some of my friends' husbands, I have to big them up too, because I know that they knew things and would send me scriptures, and I'm like, why are you sending me a scripture? Like, you know, just, like, things like that. I feel like I have a really good support system. And so I, number one, think that the prayers of the saints have, like, really kept me. And from there, after that whole thing that I went through, I pretty much, like, rededicated my heart. And that's when I started to see a shift in my perspective, in the way that I was serving God, in the way that I was, quote unquote, being single. But it was less about the fact that I'm single, and it was more about, like, how can I be used where I'm at to serve God?
Right. You can even see from that period of time then that obviously there were a lot of lies that were, you know, infiltrating, like, your mind and heart. And I think it's very easy sometimes, right? Especially when you get older and you are hearing, like, those voices, right, from different people. Because that 25 mark, sometimes it's like, you know, literally you get it from family, you get it from some friends sometimes, people in church sometimes, you know, it's like, I know you mentioned a long time ago, like, in our own conversation, some kids for you.
I love them. They mean well. They just want to see me get married.
right. So it can be almost challenging, of course, right, to keep hearing, hey, so when are you gonna get married, when are you gonna get married? And I think even as a woman, especially, because it's like, well, we don't really call the shots, you know, so we're just kind of here, you know, almost like awaiting in a sense, right? So what do you really do in those periods? Can you walk us through a little bit more of, like, specific lies that maybe were infiltrating your heart at that time?
I think, well, the number one was just, like, getting older, and once you hit that 30 mark, like, basically you're gonna be wonky. I think what a big fear for me, and one that I still have to keep in check to this day, is I have wanted to be a mom since I was, like, 2.5 years old. So it's like you start to think, okay, well, you know, you don't want to be 70 having children, like, I'm not, like, God bless Sarah, but that's not my portion. Like, I just, more like, you know, things like that, like, okay, well, like, you know, you're gonna be old, and, like, are you gonna be able to have kids, and all these lies just start coming in, and you got to keep them in check, though. Like, you need to keep them in check, and you need to keep people in check, because words are powerful. And I think at one point I would kind of allow people to speak things over me, or jokingly say this or that, or I have noticed a shift, and I don't know if that's because maybe there's a shift in what I say, so you kind of give permission to others to say what they want based on what you say about yourself, right? So words are very powerful. So
they are. I agree. I totally agree, because, and, you know, sometimes I think even side note, just in terms of like words, I think sometimes we can be very loose with them, right? And you just never know what season a person is going through at the same time, right? Like you said, you were dealing with all of these mind hassles and thoughts and stuff, right? And imagine a person now having maybe no idea is coming along, like, hey, so still single, like, that's not encouraging. So, just being mindful, of course, like if you're married and you're listening to this too, being mindful of your single friends. But so what are some truths then would you say helped you in those seasons to get to a different season of your life in this area?
So many, and I think that's because, like I said in the beginning, there are highs and lows, and if you are seeking God in the lows, and I think that's why for the last like little while, my favorite song right now is Hills and Valleys. And it's because like we do need to see God in the valleys. Like, praise God when you're at the hills, but we also need to see God in the valleys. And I think just like really clinging to the word of God, like there's so much in there, and there's so much that I feel like God has revealed to me in those valleys, not necessarily on the mountains, but in those valleys. And if I'm totally honest with you, Mercedes, when you asked me to do this podcast, I was like, okay, here's the thing. Last summer was like a huge like turnaround for me, and I was thinking, I wish she asked me last summer, because I was at my high, like my highest high, and I would just like have this and that and da da da. But if I'm totally honest with you, the last like couple of weeks, not necessarily just like focusing on singleness, but life, have been like emotionally rough for me. So like when you ask me, I'm like, man, like I don't think I'm the right person. Like I don't think. I mean, I was just crying yesterday, and I went to church and pretended that everything was okay, and you know what I mean? So like I genuinely felt like, man, I don't think I'm the person for this. But I thank you that you invited me, because it really caused me to pray harder, because I don't want to come on here and just be like, oh, woe is me and being single and it sucks, and I was like, God, if I'm going to go there in my low, then you need to use me to speak to somebody, or to speak to everyone who listens. And one thing that like literally yesterday or 2 days ago that really stood out to me when I was reading and praying was in Daniel. Actually, well, two things. And one was something that I was in a valley a long time ago and learned. But one is in Daniel chapter 10. And Daniel was in mourning for 21 days, I believe. And I think we like to think that like if we're sad, or if we like have like emotions, or we feel down, or that it's a bad thing, and it's like almost like it represents our relationship with God, that like, oh, if you're sad, then you're not believing God, or if you're sad, but it's like, no, you're allowed to have emotions, you're allowed to feel sad. Daniel mourned for 21 days, or 23, but I think it's 21, for 21 days, and during that time though, he was praying and fasting. So be sad, but do the right thing, and you know, be in prayer, be near to God. And what Daniel didn't know, that like this is what really got me, and this is something that's really keeping me, is that Daniel didn't know that there was something spiritual happening behind the scenes that he couldn't see. So what was happening was God sent his angels to give Daniel an answer, but there were like demonic forces that were preventing that from happening. But those angels were literally fighting just to get to Daniel. And I can't help but wonder, like, if he stopped praying, would the angels keep fighting? Or like, you know what I mean? Or just things along those lines. And it's just like, if you're in a low place, if you're feeling like, you know, just done or sad, or that's okay, but it's what you do with that. And just shake heaven. Like, angels are fighting for you, but you have to shake heaven. So just prayer.
Wow. Yeah. And you know what? I'm so happy that you even like mentioned all of that, and even more grateful that you came on here, because I think sometimes we almost don't talk about, you know, this area of singleness, especially like when you are getting older. Right. And we almost kind of like brush it off, like, of course, like, yeah, you know, you don't want to be like overly fixed on it, right? Because of course, like, God didn't save us to just get married and that's it, right? There's so much more purpose. But I do know that even being a person who is almost hitting 30 myself, you know, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you know, cool. And I totally agree. So I am with you in that boat where it's like, yeah, there are good days, right? And you're content, you're good, you're like, yeah, whatever. And then there are those seasons where it's like, I wonder, you know, and will it ever happen, you know? And it's like, of course you want to keep going because you don't want it to keep you down and stuff, right? But I also do agree with that, you know, it's not one of those areas where we just pretend as though they don't exist and never like deal with it. Because sometimes we're very quick to like put things under the rug and kind of pretend like, okay, it's not there. Yeah. And it is there, you know? And I think when we can be honest with ourselves and bring this before God as well, right? And say like, God, this is where I'm at right now, you know? And even like speaking to a sister about it, right?
I agree.
Yeah. And I think those are the things that really help us as well, right? And definitely.
Yeah. And, like, you think about the fact that the Bible says, like, cast your burdens onto Jesus. And we think about that, like, we sing it. Like, we know it. But I think what we forget is the second half of that says, because he cares for you.
Yes.
And I think we just think, okay, like, I just need to bring my burdens to Jesus. But we can bring our burdens to Jesus because he cares for you. And that's the same with, like, even just, like, your sisters. And I'm preaching to myself, too, because it's very hard for me. Like, I know some of my friends are going to listen to this and be like, you were crying before church and you didn't even tell me. Like, I already know that that's coming. I'm bracing myself. I love you guys. I'm sorry. We'll talk about it. But I even, like, when it comes to your friends, like, those are people who care for you. And we can share burdens with our friends because they care for us. Just like we should be casting our burdens onto Jesus because he cares for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Quality friendships, guys. Okay?
Listen to that podcast.
Yeah, just saying. Okay, so of course, you know, again, like with the single season, you know, we've talked a lot about like the discontentment aspect. We talked about lies. What would you say then I guess we kind of mentioned that as well. Like, what's been the hardest thing about being in this season? Would you say it's more of like geared towards, I guess, just not being married, or is it more of like, okay, well, marriage and like kids and like even sometimes just, I know that, you know, this is probably one of those things that are not really mentioned, but even just, it could be sometimes even being amongst those that are also married, right? Yeah. Having that community. So what would you say is that for you?
Yeah, I think that in times where it's been tough, it has been, number one, getting older, which I mentioned, but also I am the last of my friend group to get married, like the actual last, not second last, third last, the actual last. So, and when, you know, I'm never not happy for my friends. I am always rejoicing with those who rejoice. Like, I'm always happy when my friends are getting married. Right. But as people are getting married one by one, I actually remember when we were teenagers talking to a sister. I won't name her because I don't know, but I remember her saying to me, I cannot be last. Like, I do not want to be last. I will not be okay if I don't get married. I need to get married.
Wow. Like, okay.
Just straight up came up to it, and I was like, wow, you crazy. And then, but it is a thing being last, because now all your friends have moved into marriage, and it's like, okay, cool, whatever, they've moved into marriage. But now it's at a place where all my friends have moved into having kids. So that kind of changes the kind of friend, like, my friends are still my friends and they're amazing, but I have so much more freedom being single and they don't. So I might want to be like, oh my gosh, I want to like go to like Wonderland tomorrow, like, or whatever, just as an example. And they can't because they can't find a sitter, or because they have to bring their kids and we don't want to bring the kids to the rides, and you know, like things like that. Yeah. So that's kind of, those are moments when you're like, oh man, like I'm kind of just here by myself. Like I don't have anyone to like whatever. But what I want to say to that too, though, is I guess kind of speaking on loneliness in a way, that like you'll realize like, oh man, all my friends are off taking care of their kids and they can't do anything with me. But if you're lonely single, and I think this is something that I've realized too, like you're also going to be lonely married. Like obviously you're going to have companionship, it's going to be different, but there are going to be times when you're lonely while you're married as well. And it's almost like this time is like practice for your life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like, you need to practice being lonely and how to deal with that and rely, because you can only rely on Jesus. Your husband is going to let you down. And the other example I have for you was Hannah. And like, I don't know, but I just remember Hannah, like, I read this a long time ago, so please bear with me. I'm not trying to preach false doctrine, but like, just bear with me. All I know is that Hannah really wanted to have a child.
Yes.
And I remember Hannah was like walking around miserable, hanging her head, not eating, like just miserable. And I remember thinking, like, the one thing that a lot of single women want is like marriage. And she's married, she has the husband, but now she's on to the next, and she wants a child, and she doesn't have that. That's why she's miserable. And she goes and she spends time with God and comes out a different person. A child didn't fix that for her. Her husband didn't fix that for her. Only God fixed that for her, and only God can fix that for us. So my main thing is, if you're lonely, spend time with God. And I'm preaching to myself too.
Yeah. Right. We always do.
Yeah.
We always do. No, and that's absolutely correct, because I think sometimes it comes down to the view of marriage as well. I know for myself, and I've probably mentioned this in a previous episode, if not, this is the first time. So I remember a season in my life, and this was earlier on in my salvation, when God basically revealed to me that my perspective of marriage was totally off. So I had idolized marriage, right? And just the idea of it, because deep down there were insecurities, there were voids, and I was still trying to, still in that mindset of thinking that if I had a relationship, for example, I would be filled. Or if also, you know, somehow a relationship was to make me happy, you know, and that's the thing, right? Even in today's society, everything is surrounded on like, I need to be happy, I need to be happy.
Self-love.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
And so when God revealed that to me, he really just took me through a process of also even healing and coming to a place of understanding that marriage isn't about me first and foremost, right? And whether or not I do, it's never going to be about me. It's about Jesus first and foremost, right? And I remember even, and I'm going to throw this in, I know we have a list of books on our Instagram page, but there's this book that really helped me, and it's called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And that book was honestly so amazing.
It's
it
really
changed my entire perspective on singleness, on marriage, right, as a whole. And from there, I realized that, okay, God, like, this isn't about me. This is so much bigger, you know? And so even if, again, this happens, I have to make sure that it's about you. Like, you're in the center, and it's to glorify you, not myself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's true. Like, there are people that sometimes you get married, and it's like, yeah, you do still face loneliness.
Yeah, you
right?
do.
Yeah, so it's like, if you're looking to get married to hope that it's gonna fill that area of your life, or even just bring you some form of like satisfaction, you know, I would even go as far as to say that, you know, even if you're dealing with lust, for example, right, and you think somehow that in marriage then your lust will be canceled, no, you know, it's like, these are things that have to be dealt with, right? You can't expect somehow that your husband's going to be that savior for you.
That's what Jesus is for.
Exactly, right? So it's really important that we get into that mindset. Hey, RBL community, please remember to follow this podcast and follow us on Instagram to never miss out on any updates. And now, back to the episode.
I know that you're asking the questions here.
No, but, that's fine. That's fine.
You said that God revealed to you that it was idolatry. So, like, when you say idolatry, it's something that you're putting before God. So is that how you felt about marriage?
Yes. I was putting myself and marriage above God, right? And so it was just like my happiness and, you know, my marriage, and almost like this, and it's just, even saying it back now is like, oh man, I can't believe I had that kind of mindset. But even almost thinking that, like, somehow my husband, whoever he was, would have to make me happy. You know what I mean? He would have to be there and cheer me on, and, you know, like, you go girl, and, you know, and whatever the case may be, and just kind of like, just be that support and feed into all those insecurities that I had, you know what I mean? Whether it's constant affirmations or whatever. And it's like, but then you put so much pressure on the man, and that's not his job, you know? So
and you're going to be disappointed. Like, in my mind, the person I'm marrying, he's amazing, and I do think he'll be amazing. But but he's going to fall short because he's not God. He was created by God, and that's who we should be ultimately, going to for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Fulfillment.
Exactly, because that's not fair to that person either, right? And I think that's what even, and of course we'll dive more into this in another episode, but even in terms of just expectations in that sense, it's kind of like if you have these expectations and they have these expectations and we're both trying to like make sure that person is meeting those expectations, well, that's where you're kind of breeding grounds for divorce and disappointment. And and it's like, no, it's not about us. And I think when we can get out of that mindset that this person even needs to complete me before I can be satisfied, I think it really will help, right? Because if you're broken as well and that person is broken, you can't come together.
Exactly,
I think you're completing each other.
That's what one of my friends always says, like, when you get married, you're two wholes coming together. You're not two halves, like, fixing each other or being the other half to... You can lack in the same areas. Like, you cannot be the other half to somebody. Yeah. There was something that I read, and I remember it said to make a list, and I was like, I'm not doing that. That's whack. Yeah. Mostly because I just didn't want to think about. I was like super crusty about marriage and whatever. And then somebody said like, you should write a list and and just different things like that. Don't get me wrong. If you've written a list, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that you know what you want, go ahead, whatever. But I think we need to be careful with those lists because a lot of it becomes, what can my husband do for me?
Right.
And I think, like, especially as I get older and I pray for my husband, I pray for my children, I pray for my children's children, like, I put that up in prayer. I send those prayers to heaven because, not necessarily because of what he can do for me, but I pray for his relationship with God. I pray that I can be someone who he's praying for, like right now, that I'm somebody who can encourage him, who can be a submissive wife, and who can be, so it's not just about, God, this is what I want, although I do lift those up too, like, I'm like, God, but, like, please don't send me a donkey or something, but, no, I'm kidding, but, I lift those ones up too, but I think we get very sidetracked with that, what can my husband bring to me? And I want him to be like this. And we forget that, like, I remember in my list, I'm rambling, sorry, but I remember in my list, I wrote something about is at prayer, is this, is that, and I was reading it and I remember thinking, do you do everything on this list? So I think we need to, take a step back, reflect, make sure we're the wife that we want, whatever our husbands, that we want him to be our wife. But, like, I think we need to take a step back and prepare ourselves, prepare our hearts, and pray for someone to be a good man of God, but not necessarily something that is just there to appease you.
Right. So the whole 6-pack and 6 figures.
Yeah,
and
like, that's nice. And God, like, I'm not saying I don't want that, but I am saying. But
those are not like high priorities, basically. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't remember which book actually this was, but I know that there was made mention of just the whole topic of relationships as well. And the author was stating that, when it comes down to a lot of married women that he has surveyed, majority of them always refer to the characteristics, right? So not the physical appearance, right? And it's like, I wish he was like this more, and it always came down to the heart, right? And his leadership, his initiative, whatever the case may be. And so it's true. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a preference or even having like a list, right, of things. Definitely sure you don't want to make a list of 100 things. But definitely, like things that are more important, like what's going to matter. I remember having a conversation with someone one time, and one thing that they stated, and it always stuck with me, is that, whomever you marry, if the Lord tarries and you do get married, you have to understand that if kids are now in the picture, your sons are going to look to him for guidance, you know what I mean? And this is who your son is going to say, like, that's my dad, and I'm going to become like him. And your daughter is going to go out and look for a man like their dad. So you have to make sure that this is the person that, I want, as a spouse, and they're going to reflect those characteristics that are really going to matter, because again, it's not about us, right? It's about Jesus. So are you going to be able to come to prayer, for example? Are you going to be able to, have that family where it's like God is in the center, or is it just kind of like you just want marriage for your own
Yeah,
sake, right?
yeah.
If we are so fixed on getting married to satisfy us, well, what's going to happen? And especially if you say things like, well, I want a man of God, right? A man of God will love God, right? And love people. So that means he's going to be out there. He's going to be doing stuff. He may not necessarily become a pastor per se, or an evangelist, or whatever the case may be, but he still will want to do things for the kingdom, right? And if you're really not on that same page, that's going to bother you. And it's going to take a real huge hit on you, because here he is, he's wanting to spend time with people, and you're just wanting to spend time with him, you know, and he's wanting to bring people over, and you just want alone time. And not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but understanding too that, like, are you both on the same page in that sense, right? So of course, if you do want that, if that's a big characteristic, making sure that that's where your heart is at too, so it's not causing a huge conflict, right? Being just real with yourself. And so we already kind of were touching on this, but I also wanted to ask, what would you say then are some practical steps, you know, you can take as a woman who is single right now in preparing for marriage, if that was to come your way?
I think one thing that I did, probably after that 29 mark or whatever, actually I think it was a bit before that, but I made a 5-year game plan. And I think we get so caught up in the things that we don't have control over. And I think sometimes it's important to have goals that you can achieve, that are attainable because of what you do. Do you know what I mean? So not the most important, but just make goals for yourself that you can accomplish, instead of being caught up in the like what ifs or hopefully, or keep it concrete. Another, I know I mentioned before prayer, but like really be in prayer. I went into that already. And then another thing I would say is, if you are in a state of waiting, the chances are you are always going to be in a state of waiting, right? Right now, if you're waiting, you may be waiting for a husband, or you may be waiting for a baby, or you may be waiting to buy a house, or so. Get good at waiting, and what good waiters do is they serve. So get involved, serve. That's what waiters do, serve. So get involved in your church, get involved with people. I think that that's what helps me the most, is having people under me who I can pour out into. When it comes to waiting, like I was saying before, like we're constantly in a state of waiting, and it's not a bad thing. Like you're exactly where God wants you to be. And I even think we have to wait. We're waiting for the return of Jesus. We are literally always waiting, and we should be waiting, and we should be anticipating, and get good at waiting at those things, so that we get good at waiting for Jesus to come back, or we won't make it.
How does a person find purpose then in their season of singleness? Because I think sometimes there's this misconception that until I get married, my life can't start, you know? And it's like, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this, I can't do that, even if there's a desire to maybe be out in the mission field someday, right? It's almost like, well, I can't do anything because I'm not married. So how would a person find purpose in their season?
I think first and foremost, you need to learn to be content. And when you think of contentment, I think of Paul, and I know Paul used the word learn, like I learned to be content, or I don't know if those are the words verbatim, but Paul learned. It wasn't something that just happened. He learned. And that's why when I thought to myself before I came here, like, are you content? I think purposefully, yes. But naturally, like, you are not content with what you have. You're always looking over and thinking this is greener. So I think learning to be content, and the way that you can do that is focusing on what you have. I think it's very easy to say, like, you know, well, I don't have this and I don't have that and whatever, but focus on what you do have. Like, I remember I work in a school, and I just remember this time when we had blocked off different areas. So like you're with your class and maybe 2 other classes in a small area ish, and they all play there, and then it's blocked off by a line. I remember this time seeing my students, and they were all standing on that line and just looking over at like the other kids play. And I'm thinking, like, you have your side, you have a basketball net here, like basketball's the best sport, so like come here and play basketball. Like, so like I'm watching them stand at the line, and it's like, you could be having fun, you could be playing basketball, you could be playing tag, but you're standing at the line like wishing that you could go over there. Right. And so I think like being content with what you do have, and you have a lot. Like being single is not, it's not a punishment. Right. And like you can, even the fact that I'm here right now, I'm like, wow, God, like you're using me. Like this is not, I'm not just single because I'm just single. I'm single for the glory of God, and I'm exactly where he wants me to be. Yeah. So just knowing what you have and focusing on that and using that.
I love that because it's true. It's like we're so quick, and you mentioned this earlier too, so quick to get to the next season, right? And it's like so quick to get to the next season that we never really take time to enjoy the season that we're actually in. Yeah. And I know that you mentioned before that there are advantages, right? Like you were talking about like, if you wanted to go out, for example, just calling up your friends and, they'd have to find a sitter, for example. Whereas for you as a single woman, it's like, I can just go.
Yeah, I don't got to answer to nobody. You know what I mean? Like, no, yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
She was rapping, guys.
Yeah. We all saw what happened in the beginning here, so I can't rap. But, that's definitely a perk. It can kind of sound selfish, but like living on my own, I clean up after myself, I cook for myself, I have more time to do things. I decided one day that, hey, I'm gonna go back to school and get my degree. Like that's a goal I can accomplish, right? And it's something that I've wanted to do, so why not just do it? Right. And I can. Do you know what I mean? Like I have the time to do it, so I want to make my time useful. I think just things like that, like you have the freedom to not only just do things for yourself, but do things for the kingdom. I can minister to girls in a different way, especially because I'm older and single. I remember when I was younger, like 18, the oldest single person was like 26, 27. And I remember being like, whoa, she's pushing like, wow, like she's getting up there. But as much as I didn't need to relate to her because I was 18, her testimony still spoke volumes to me, and she was so young. But like, I just thought, oh my gosh, like she's so much older than us, and she's still single, and everyone else is married. Like, you know what I mean? So your testimony, you can be a testimony with just living your life, really, because like when people are like, it's so powerful that you're serving God and you're single, it's like, I mean, I'm just serving God. Like, it's not necessarily I'm serving God and I'm single. It's just I'm just serving God, and what happens. So.
Singleness is just a status.
Yeah, so. It's a Facebook status. Ain't nothing else. Like, it's true. Very true. It's very true.
So. And so at the end of the day, we don't have to feel as though like you're almost like missing out. Because you are single. It's true. There's so much that you can do. Like I'm with you on that. Like, if I want to go travel today, I can. I mean, COVID, but
finances, COVID. Yeah. But if I wanted to, and if I had the financial means,
then I could go.
Yeah, I went to Europe. I just picked up and went to Europe. Like, and I met another friend down there who's single, and
look at that.
We went around to different countries in Europe, and I feel like that probably wouldn't have been an opportunity otherwise, or even impact teams. It's much cheaper for me to go by myself. Right. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that there are a lot of perks, but we just got to play at our own basketball net sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. So, I hear you on that. That's so true. And even in terms of things that you can do as of now, as a single woman, like if you need to go back to school, now is the time, right? Like, why wait? You know, it's like there's all this time, there's a season, rather than focusing on the next season and wanting to rush and stuff. Like, you can have that desire, fine, but do something right now. You can pick up a new hobby, for example, right? You can pick up an instrument. I remember for me in 2015 was when I started baking, basically.
Oh, Nick, can you bake for me? Because I really suck at baking.
I got you.
What's your specialty?
Cheesecake.
Oh, cheesecake, yes. Okay, you're coming over.
And I love it. I never knew how much I loved baking until I started baking, and it's like there's so much, there's so much. And even I love that you said investing in other people as well, right? Because it's true. Like, God can literally use any season that you're in for his glory.
Yeah.
And there are people that maybe they are struggling in that season. And sometimes they're even younger, you know?
Yeah.
And you're kind of tempted, like, okay, you know, like,
calm down, boo.
yeah. You're not there yet. But still, you know, it's great that they can have a role model to see that, hey, you know what? They're making it, and they're older, and they're in a different place that I'm at, right? And so if they can make it, then I can too, you know? So I think it's really good that God can use us in that season, right? For other people's lives. So there's some light in the tunnel of
there's
singleness.
lots of light, man. There is lots of light. You just gotta stop, like, looking behind you, or, like, you know, just stay focused, look up.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, how would you say then, have you guarded your heart in this season as well? Because you know what, like, let's be honest, in church or just in life in general, sometimes you may be attracted to a person,
right.
You know, maybe you might have like a little crush here and there, which is perfectly normal and perfectly fine, right? But I also think sometimes, like, for example, in that season, disappointment can easily creep up, especially if, let's say, you've had like a crush, for example, right, on a person, and then they end up marrying someone else, or marrying even your friends, right? That may come as a, like, oh, okay, moment for you. So how do you guard your heart as a single woman?
I think it's important to, there's so many ways that you can guard your heart. But just to name a few, I think you need to have very clear standards and stick to them. It can be, you can get to a place where you're like, you know, I'm going to kind of, you know, compromise on this or compromise on that. And that's never a good place to be, because it doesn't end well. Right. But even just like in the world, making those stands, but making your stands known verbally, like saying your stands out loud, because I think that makes a huge difference when people start to kind of hold you accountable, because it's like, oh, but I thought you don't this, or I thought you don't that. So I think one way to guard your heart is by being very outward about what your standards are, and sticking to those. Another thing is like what you watch, what you listen to. That's another way to guard your heart. Is, I know for me, when I got saved, not long after I got saved, I cut out worldly music. Right. However, I got a car. All of a sudden I'm listening to the radio. And I remember being like, oh, like, you know, I don't want to listen to certain stations. And then next thing you know, I'm on Flow and find out that they're doing throwbacks now. Like, what, this is a thing? When did this happen? These are my tunes from back in the day. So I remember justifying that and being like, oh, I can listen to this because it's old music. But there are certain themes that the music tends to have. Yes. And I remember feeling like, this is changing me. And like very slowly, and like I don't even know, molasses, but it is. It's I'm starting to see changes in my desires and things like that. And so I think it's important to guard your heart based on like what you're watching, what you're listening to, making very clear standards and knowing your worth. You know, I remember God, actually I really didn't even plan on saying this at all, but I remember God speaking to me a while ago about not only guarding my heart, but guarding the heart of this man who could be my future husband or someone else's future husband, you know? But when God created Adam, he created him out of dirt or dust or whatever. And then he took us out of Adam's rib. And the purpose of a rib is to protect the heart and to protect those vital organs. And so as a woman, as a rib, your job is to protect the heart. And so when God like revealed that to me, I was like, first of all, mind blown. Wow. And I started to take that role seriously. Like this, I was created out of a rib. I am a protector of the heart. My heart, his heart, your heart. Yeah. So yeah.
Wow. Moment of silence for that one. No, and I totally agree with that, right? Like even the term like guarding your heart, I think just to throw it out there, it doesn't mean like shield yourself and never talk to a brother and never like, you know, be afraid or whatever, because they're, you know, you're still brothers and sisters in Christ at the end of the day, right? And you're gonna go to workplaces, you're gonna meet people of the opposite sex as well,
Yeah.
right? But I think, just like you said, having those standards and knowing what you stand for at the end of the day, right? I think that really kind of helps maneuver and, you know, just like what you won't allow. Because I think sometimes we almost like blur the lines,
Right.
you know? And it's like society will dictate for you if you don't make sure you're having those dictations and those standards, right?
Yeah. Know who you are and whose you are.
Yes, yes, that's it right there. Everybody. So, what would you say then, in terms of, because I know that even I mentioned idolizing marriage, for example, and having like a healthy desire for marriage. How would you differentiate, for anyone listening out here, how would you differentiate the difference between idolizing marriage and having a healthy desire?
Yeah, I think you have to ask yourself tough questions. So why do you want to get married? You know, back to Hannah.
Yeah.
But when Hannah prayed for a son, she said, God, like, I'm going to give this son back to you.
Yeah.
And when you're praying for a marriage, is it because you want to give it back to God? Like, are you going to use this marriage for God's glory or for yours?
Right.
So I think that that's where the difference starts to come in, is when, and I've had to ask myself those tough questions too. Like, what is it? Do you just want comfort? Do you just want someone to talk to when you're lonely at night? Or like, you know what I mean? Or like, do you want to give this marriage back to God? And I think that that's where you start to see a difference is, what you want to be married for, the glory of God or yourself.
I love that. So here comes the $1 million question.
Oh boy.
And it's a question that I know, I think even for myself, before I get into it, has been something that I had to answer on my own, right? And because the reality of it is, as much as we can desire, whether it's marriage or anything in this world, right? The reality of it is not all of our desires will be met on this side of life.
I'm smiling because I see where you're going. Okay.
So they won't be met,
or
at least not in the way that we would anticipate for them to be met, right?
Right.
So, of course, in light of that, what if you never get married?
Shots fired. What if I personally never get married?
Yeah.
Okay, so to be honest with you, this was a big one for me for a long time.
Okay.
Like, this was, like I told you earlier, I was definitely in a place where I just kept giving God ultimatums. Like, you know, but I'm not even just saying this just to say it for the podcast, but I came to a place where I said, God, if I never get married, you're still enough. And don't get me wrong, there are times when I have to remind myself that God is still enough.
Yes.
God is still enough. God is still enough. And God is better. God is better than anything else out there. And there is nothing outside of the will of God for me. And I know because I peaked. But there is nothing outside of the will of God for me. And I think I've heard people say, like, you know, you just have to just know that God's enough. You just have to make up your mind that you're never going to backslide. And when I would hear that, I'm like, you don't get it. Like, you don't understand what it's like to be on this side.
Right.
But I can say that I came to a place where I'm like, God, I'm done giving you ultimatums. There's nothing there for me. And I genuinely believe that. Would it be hard? Yes, it would definitely be hard because I desire to get married. And I do believe that God has something for me. I don't believe that I'm not ever going to get married. But if that were what were to happen, there's no it's not an option. Like, God is God and God is good, so I'm just gonna serve him.
I love that because it's true. There's, you know, at the end of the day, God still created each and every one of us with a purpose, right? And so it's kind of like, well, that purpose is still and can be still fulfilled, whether or not marriage is a part of that, you know? And I think it comes down to, well, what do we really want? Like, the will of God for our lives or our own will, you know? And hey, like, again, there's nothing wrong with desiring marriage. Like, I'm in that same boat, you know what I mean? Like, of course, like, I do desire it, but at the same time, same thing like you said, I don't think, and I don't even think, I know that there's nothing out there, you know, that can satisfy like Jesus. And I think you can have a life that is fulfilled, right? And totally just grounded in Christ, right? And just, you can really just live your life for Jesus, and you can still be fulfilled. Even those desires that you would think would be fulfilled in marriage, you can still experience that in singleness.
Yeah. And there's even a woman in Tucson who, like, again, I was so young, but I was so intrigued by her life because she was so much older. I don't know how old she is. I'm assuming she's probably like in her late 40s now, assuming. And she's not married, but every year she has sisters at her house, like, for conference. She always has. And I remember, like, her blessing me, like, me hanging out with her and just having the opportunity to talk about the things of God with her, and she just shared so much knowledge, so much wisdom, and
love it.
And, like, it never came up, like, but I'm not married. So it was like God used her, and she's a reference point for me. I don't even talk to her. I haven't talked to her in years. I don't remember the last time I saw her. But she's a reference point to me to this day, and that was when I was like 20 years old, like 10 years ago, that like I was at conference. And yes, things don't always go according to plan. Like, even when you think of Jacob with Rachel and Leah, and he saw Rachel and was like, that's the girl. She's gorgeous. Worked 7 years for her and got tricked and got Leah. So I think that wasn't how he planned for things to go, but God tends to use those things that, like, you least expect. And it's from Leah that the lineage heads down to Jesus. Right. You know what I mean? So Jesus is not Rachel's lineage, it's Leah's lineage, which was not part of Jacob's plan. So I think a lot of times, every time, God's plan is better.
Yeah. So that makes me think of the verse that says, we make our plans, but the Lord directs our steps, and it's true. Like, when we just come to that place where it's like, I'm surrendering this to you, God, you do with it as you please. I think we can really experience not only just like joy, but peace and the fullness of God's like presence and just like the plan that he has for our lives as well. I even want to touch a little bit on like singleness as a gift versus a curse, because I think, or even the gift of singleness, I should say, because I think sometimes we think that people are just born with this gift, right? And I remember reading this in this, now that I think about it, I think I read a lot.
Yeah, that's good.
I was reading something, again, I don't recall which book exactly, but I know that this woman had stated that, singleness was not something that, was a gift per se that she was born with. And then it's kind of like she kind of came to that realization where she kind of had to like just grow in contentment, right? Because she was like, I believe she said 57 or something like that, right? And she was not married.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like she got married at that age.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, that's long. But at the same time, that was God's plan for her life,
Yeah.
And so it was just really interesting to me because I was like, wow, we would look at that like, no, at this point, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But that happened at that age, right? And so, but she still, of course, like lived a full life, right? She did what she needed to do. And so it was just interesting because I don't think sometimes we look at the gift of singleness in the right lens. I think we look at it as almost like, you're born with it and therefore you'll never have that desire to be married. Yeah. Where I think as it's more so of kind of like you can grow that gift of singleness, right? That I think, maybe if you're in a season and it's just not happening, not forcing yourself into contentment per se, but realizing that God's plan is the best plan. And I think that even if that ends up happening and you do remain single, that you can still have the grace of God in your life to help you maneuver through. Because of course, God's plan isn't for you to just say, okay, you know what, forget you, God, I'm gonna go back into the world and try to bring a man, here, and he's gonna serve you by force.
Evangelating.
Yeah. Evangelating. Because we know that doesn't really work, and it's easier to pull someone out than it is to pull them in. So you definitely want to be mindful of that, right? But yeah, that's more or less. So my question now to you is, what would you say is a piece of advice that you would give someone out there who may be listening, who maybe is on the quote-unquote older side? I don't even like to use that term because, to be honest, 30 is not old, okay, at all. At all. Okay, 30 is the new 20. And so, 30 is just that age where you get everything together and, 30 is amazing. But what would you say for someone who maybe is in that season of life, you know, whether they are in that age group or even a little bit younger, maybe they're even a little bit older, and they are struggling in this season. They're totally discontent. How would you advise them?
First and foremost, I would want to say to them that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And don't feel like the way that you feel is different. Like, you know, this is abnormal. Because we have a high priest who sympathizes with us.
Yes.
And so I think the main thing that I would say to you is that you're not alone, and, you know, talk to somebody. If you let people know how you're feeling, talk to God, be in prayer, serve, all the things that I pretty much have said.
Yeah.
But I think everything I've said, and you're not alone. So reach out and
Yeah, definitely not alone. Okay, so there's 1,000,001 of us out here.
Yeah, in times when you can be lonely in a group of people, you're not alone though.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow, we can go on forever.
Yeah, I think we're both talkative people too.
We are, which is not wrong. You know? This is one of those topics, but anyways, we are going to wrap this up. I appreciate you so much, Alisha, for coming on here. It's so amazing.
I appreciate you so much. Like I appreciate you, and I just also want to say that for everyone out there, I prayed for you, and I really hope that you took something from this.
Yes.
Even if it's just one thing, I hope that you took something from it. And I prayed for you, and I will continue praying for you out there.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for today, and until next time, stay encouraged.